And in our early conversations, you talked passionately about um, hearing employees, and I've seen it referred to in other places as capturing the employee voice and incorporating that into the board's oversight. Could you comment on that further? What that means to you? And
Sure. And this goes back to some of the Future of the American Boardroom Commission work that we did. Yeah, most boards, when they have experiences with employees in the organization or when they receive data, from the organization on human capital, oftentimes it's very carefully vetted and curated by management. Uh, and there's a question in some directors' minds that we talk to through the process about whether they're getting the full picture of what's happening in the organization. And it turns out some boards are taking steps to move beyond those very carefully curated interactions with employees to having uncurated, spontaneous interactions with employees. Have a board meeting at a major facility and have lunch with a group of employees of all levels in the organization, or lots of different ways that directors are doing this. But moving beyond just the curated experiences that management provide the board so that the board can get a better handle on what is actually going on in the culture of the organization, what's actually going on at various tenures of the organization, how different employees are thinking about their job, their workplace, how they fit in. It's an important piece that I think a lot of boards, frankly, just don't have.
If I can, Sherry, I want to comment on a couple of things that John said. One is this idea of having a long-term view, even in a world that is so unpredictable, like the one that we're in, right? We couldn't have predicted a recession. We couldn't have predicted COVID, all of those things. But I do think having a hardwired process to continually look at, do I have the talent for the future? Am I thinking about my organization is critically important. And having the directors have an understanding of what the societal architecture or culture is of the business, and being able to answer the question as a director, if you were describing this company, not from a financial standpoint, from a qualitative standpoint, how would you describe the company, and how do you think the employees would describe it? Really interesting way to think about the companies that we have some oversight for. The second point is one of the things that I like to do with clearly the CEO's knowledge is I always get to my board meetings early, and I do management by walking around. And I stop in people's office and just say, how are you doing? What's going on? What do you think about the quarter? Are you optimistic? All of those kinds of questions. And there's never, ever a time that I would not, and the people know that I would not report back to the CEO if there's something. I'm not looking to catch that person. I'm really looking to get an insight that you don't necessarily get when everybody is sitting there very tense on the other side of the table, understanding that they're being viewed. When they're relaxed and when they're in their office, you get a whole different side of that person, and you get a sense of the culture in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. Just one method for getting an insight into the companies that we have responsibility for.
I might also, go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
No, I was also going to add not just the walking around, but I'm certain that everyone does board dinners, right? Encourage additional people to come to those board dinners, to give the directors exposure to a broader swath of the organization, not just executives. And then as board members, engage in discussions that aren't just very specific to the material that you got that you read ahead of time. Engage in what's going on, as Theo just mentioned, about what's happening in the company, because I think you get a very different insight, to your point, in their office, I might argue, to over a beer or over a glass of wine. You also may get a very different perspective that leads into other kinds of discussions besides.
John, I think you had something.
No, I was just going to say that the Theo's phrase "management by walking around" came up so many times. And some directors are a little bit nervous about walking around at the company. They don't feel like they have the license to do that. Others do. But the ones that do and take advantage of that seem like they come at the problem with a much firmer base of knowledge than those that simply rely on those curated interactions.
I think one of my best experiences as a director is the company I've now tenured off holds a strategy couple days, and it includes mid-management, and they're all representing their business lines, their projects. And so you have one or two directors only attend each year, and you have this unfiltered opportunity to meet with really the up and coming talent and hear what they're thinking. And I found that to be one of the most positive and enlightening experiences that I've had as a director. So I would encourage, there are a lot of board members on here, to create those opportunities and take them for your boards.
And Sherry, just as a pylon for that, I might even say, as you have those strategy discussions, broaden out that succession discussion. Avoid just having your succession discussion about the CEO. So we saw that the question in the survey was about just the CEO. Broaden it out to say, as Theo talked about earlier, right? I might have the right people in place for this type of organization, but if this is where we're headed, who's in the pipeline that can lead us where we need to go? Or do we need to go find that talent and incorporate that within that same strategy discussion besides?
I have one last question, though, and it's a little bit different. And it comes from another report that I read that identified, and I think it's very true for so many companies, that there are really two workforces. There are the people that you hire that go through HR, get hired, get onboarded, get benefits. And then there are people who are hired as contingent workers through procurement or project managers that are a completely different set of a workforce. Now, what are our responsibilities in terms of listening to a workforce that may be contingent? It may be engineers, it could be data scientists, it could be day workers, it could be anything. What are your thoughts?
Listen, I'll take that. I think there's two sides. You know, and I know that companies take two positions sometimes with this, right? It's that's a contingent, that's someone else's employee. Yeah. Having said that, they are your future employee. And so if you're not using that as part of the engagement, I'm not saying you're going to survey them, they're not your employees, right? And there's some reasons why you may choose that they're not your employees. But they may be your future people. And I think they may also tell you things that you don't hear from your other employees, generally. But I think if you think about it as they are the future employees, then you do listen to them. And they tell you things. Listen, if you are in industries where safety is critical, you're managing that contingent workforce just as you're managing your regular workforce relative to safety. So why are other things necessarily significantly different?
They're also going to influence the culture of the company, just like a full-time employee. They work side by side. Their complaints make their way around to everyone else's. Their successes are celebrated, just like full-time employees are celebrated. If you don't take them into account, you're doing yourself a massive disservice for a number of reasons.
If you believe that quote from Henry Ford, that the two most important things are reputation and people. Reputation is customers, reputation is contingents, reputation is disruption on social media. All of those things come into play, and you can't downplay any of them. You have to play up to them to be the kind of place that contingent workers are a great source of talent, because you have somebody who's on the job and you can see what the work is that they do. You want them to want to work for you. And the only way you do that is make them feel like this is an organization where people are heard and where they have a contribution to make to the organization. Hugely important.
I think those are all great observations. And Melinda, I really can relate to what you said. Your contingent worker is your future employee. And everything. They impact your reputation just as anyone else, maybe more so.